Chair for implementation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I'm Honorable Teno, member for Elwak South and Chairperson, Committee on Implementation. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to move the motion that this County Assembly adopt the report of Committee on Implementation on the status of motion passed by the County Assembly in 2018. Honorable Speaker, the Committee on Implementation drive its mandate as per Standing Order number 1912 ABC, which states that there shall be a select committee to be known as Committee on Implementation. The committee shall scrutinize the resolution of the County Assembly, including adopted committee reports, petitions, and the undertaking given by the County Executive Committee, and examine whether or not such decision and undertaking have been implemented, and where implemented, the extent to which they have been implemented, and whether such implementation has taken place within the minimum time necessary, and whether or not legislation passed by the County Assembly has been operationalized, and where operationalized, the extent to which such operationalization has taken place within the minimum time necessary. The committee may propose to the County Assembly sanction against any member of County Executive Committee who fails to report to the relevant Select Committee on Implementation status without justifiable reason. Mr. Speaker, sir, the committee consists of the following honorable members as listed below. Acknowledgement. Mr. Speaker, may I take this opportunity to thank honorable members for their input and commitment during committee deliberation and compilation of this report. I also take this opportunity to thank the Office of the Speaker and the Office of the Clerk for their support, they accorded to the committee. It is now my pleasant duty and privilege on behalf of the committee to present the report of Committee on Implementation on the status of the motion passed by the Assembly. I'm quite longer than this. Adoption of the report. Mr. Speaker, we, the members of the Committee on Implementation, do hereby adopt this report on the status of motion passed by the County Assembly in 2018 and passed on to Mandera County Assembly Standing Order number, and affix our signatures to confirm its accuracy, validity, and authenticity on today, Tuesday, 13 November 2018. Honorable Teno Abdunur, Honorable Ali Magolo, Honorable Ali Nur Ali, Honorable Nur Mohammed, Honorable Abdurrahman Ali Usaq. Mr. Speaker, the second page is a background status of the motion. Honorable Speaker, the County Secretary, Mr. Abdunur Malusen, appeared before the committee on 3rd May 2019 to shed light on the status of the motion passed. Below is the current implementation status of motion passed by the Assembly as from 2018 as per respective department and the provision of the Standing Order number 1912B. Motions. Mr. Speaker, with your leave, since the motion is quite voluminous, you allow me to go to the page 9, where the motions talk about the real idea. And for the motion number 1 raised by Mheshimiwa the motion by Mheshimiwa Hon Abdi Hassan Ali of Malkamari. It talks about that this county executive put in place urgent measures for assistance of internally displaced persons in providing relief food. Mr. Speaker, the response by the County Secretary as per the motion is there is monthly distribution of food done in Domal, Andrak, and Garbicha as per response by the County Secretary, followed by his appearance before the committee. However, in the supplementary budget passed in October 2019 for financial year 1920, this provision was removed after the County Assembly approved motion by member for township seeking for conversion of food ration to cash transfer. Mr. Speaker, the correspondence is annexed. Mr. Speaker, the second motion is by Hon Kula Alio. It talks about the county executive to put in place measures to integrate sustainable development goals into county development plans. Mr. Speaker, response to this statement is that plan to implement the motion is in place. Linkage with CIDP to SDG financial year 2018 to 2022 plan, value addition and coordination of management of local industries through establishment of food and non-food industries such as Elwak cement factories, construction of fruit processing industries in Mandera East, leather tannery at Takaba, home processing factory in Banisa, and all the above falls under SDG 8, 9, 1, 2, 12, and 17. enhance agricultural production by investing in irrigation program, extension of canals, dry land farming, thorough construction of hay store, distribution of assorted grass seed for fodder production, animal treatment, and routine vaccination. All this falls under SDG 1, 2, 13, and 15 as per annex. Mr. Speaker, the second motion is by Honorable Yaqubs, and it talks about that the County Public Service Board employ ECD, that early childhood education teachers be employed on permanent and pensionable basis, that county government complies with early childhood development standard guidelines when constructing early childhood centers. Mr. Speaker, the answers to this question is that center managers were appointed from senior ECD staff for every school, ECD teachers employed on permanent and pensionable terms. There are a total of 23,120 ECD learners in the county, and the feeding days are as follows. Mr. Speaker, term 1, 60 days, term 2, 70, term 3, 60. Because of the inconsistency of supplies of feeding program to school by World Food Program, many school-going pupils rely on the same food supply by the county government. This somehow is challenging for steady and continuous supply of food to schools for ECD learners. The ministry is in the process of engaging WFP to find lasting solution to the problem. On the standard size of the classroom, the department has complied, and the current bill of quantities for construction of ECD class reads 8 meter by 8.6 meter, including veranda. The fourth motion is again by Honorable Kula, Mr. Speaker, and it talks about the county executive through Ministry of Gender, Social, vet all persons with disabilities to set aside funds. Mr. Speaker, in response, the department lies within NHIF and Mandera Ministry of Health on ways to cover persons with disabilities, including collection of data of persons with PWDs that are not covered across the country in coordination with ward administrators, preparation of disability assessment form, and subsequent budgeting for the program is in progress. Plan to include program in future budgetary allocation. Mr. Speaker, there is also annex to that extent. The fifth motion is by Honorable Mohammed Ibrahim. It talks about illegal land fencing. Mr. Speaker, in response, the ministry has not allocated the land outside the planning boundaries. Fencing of lands by individual is illegal. The department has actively involved the enforcement department to demolish the illegal fence. The ministry has prepared the community land inventory, which will guide the allocation and titling lands to relevant committees. In addition, the County Ministry of Lands, Housing and Physical Planning has prepared and submitted to the County Assembly special plan for Mandera East, Elwak, and Kutulo, which will address issue of land once approved by the Assembly. Mr. Speaker, the sixth motion is by myself, and it talks about drainage of Elwak town. Mr. Speaker, in response to that, the county government has completed the preparation of integrated development plan for Elwak town. The plan will address drainage and other sewer line. Mr. Speaker, there is an annexure to that effect. Mr. Speaker, the seventh motion is by Honorable Shankaron Ibrahim, and the motions talk about executive to put in place measures including strengthening of gender response mechanism to ensure economic empowerment of women in Mandera County through provision of capacity building, grant support, household income for women. Mr. Speaker, in response to that, the county government has prioritized capacity building as way of empowering women. Sewing machines were purchased for those with tailoring skills. Packaging of meat locally referred to as Nyiri Nyiri. Honey farming was also supported financially by county government, especially in Mandera town. Fridge were also purchased to assist the vendors in preservation of milk. More empowerment has been planned for the coming financial years, 1920. Budget has provided for further empowerment of women through purchase of sewing machines and saloon equipment. Mr. Speaker, the motion number 8 is by Honorable Abdullah Yunus Gulia. It talks about devolution of sanitation to ward level. In response, the answer is sanitation program is ongoing in 7 sub-county headquarters. It is very expensive to roll it to the ward level. This is because vehicle required, Maintenance of dump site is also not cheap and it takes lengthy process. There's need for elaborate planning and resource, which is sometimes challenging. However, the department will initiate the process soon. 3 out of 5 wards of Mandera East and the municipality, and the same will be extended to Elwak once it attains the municipality status. Honorable Speaker, the ninth motion is by Honorable Umul Khair, and the motions talk about the county government of Mandera to establish gender-based recovery center which provide medication, counseling, and referrals for victims of GBV. Mr. Speaker, the response is gender-based recovery center needs substantial amount of money to actualize it, and the department is yet to construct GBV center due to financial constraint. The Department of Gender and Social Service estimated it nearly 100 million. This amount is currently unavailable. The ministry is, however, engaging with the donor agencies to fund this program. Mr. Speaker, the 10th motion is by Hussein Adan Haji, and it talks about cemeteries in sub-counties. And in response to that, Integrated Development Plan for Elwak, Mandera, and Kutulo have given provision for adequate cemeteries. The local community is unplanned. The local communities is unplanned. Urban setters have also been mandated to identify land for cemeteries. The Ministry of Land will thereafter undertake identification and demarcation and documentation of cemetery of lands. Mr. Speaker, there is an annexure to that effect. Motion number 11 is by Honorable Abbas Abdullah. These motions talks about county referral hospital, including diagnostic, MRI, CT scan, cancer diagnostic. The county ministry held through the public health department collaborate with the National Cancer Institute. In response to that motion, the department has the following diagnostic measures in place. CT scan is in place for early detection of cancer, well-equipped imaging department that offer full range of service that include X-ray, mammogram, and ultrasound, well-equipped histology department at the county referral hospital lab to provide basic screening service. Mr. Speaker, the 12th motion is by Honorable Abdurrahman Alio, and it talks about addressing perennial water problems in Banissa. And the response to that, the borehole was drilled to the depth of 300 meter deep below the ground level, but due to circulation, cutting were not coming out to the surface as required, hence this site was abandoned. Mr. Speaker, the second site was Lulis. The borehole was successfully drilled to the depth of 2.5 meters. Even though the driller encountered loose formation, the installation of the surface casting was done to remedy the situation, and the borehole was drilled to a maximum depth of 310 meters below the ground level. The borehole was successfully drilled to a total depth of 300 meters below ground level. Water was struck between 285 to 305 meters. Installation of casing screen was done successfully. The borehole was developed for 8 hours with an estimated yield of 2 meters per hour. Pump testing has been done, and the borehole discharge is 2.0 meters per hour, awaiting equipping Banissa borehole 2. The borehole was successfully drilled to a total depth of 325. Water was struck between 185 to 200 and 285, all along to 315 meters below ground level. Installation, casing screen, and gravel packaging was done successfully. The borehole was developed for 8 hours with estimated yield between 5 to 6 meters per hour. Pump testing has not been done yet as the road were impassable due to recent heavy rain, but the contractor has been instructed to conduct pump testing for the borehole to ascertain its actual yield immediately by the time roads become accessible. Test pumping is not yet done. To operationalize the borehole, the following activities will be undertaken: equipping of Banissa and Lulis borehole with a genset and a solar power, construction of elevated steel tank and masonry tanks at Banissa and Lulis, construction of pump house, fencing of intakes, lane of rising and distribution of main pipeline. Mr. Speaker, it is also as annexed. Mr. Speaker, the last motion was also by Honorable Kula, and this talks about construction of mini stadium with sport facilities and establishment of a sport academy. In response to this, the department conducted public participation of Takaba Stadium, Takaba, Banisa, Lafe, and Mandera North. Site was successfully identified. Construction work and fencing of Takaba Stadium has been factored in financial year 1920 budget. However, due to budgetary constraints, the department will plan the same in 2020 to 2021 budget. Support and funding for sporting activities, the Department of Culture and Tourism. Sport has successfully conducted ward tournament in all 30 wards in the county. This exercise benefited 282 registered football clubs. The 2 winning teams from each ward, a total of 60 teams, will be given sport kits, a trophy, and a cash prize in May 2019. The department intends to organize county tournament involving 7 teams from each sub-county. Mr. Speaker, that brings us to the end of the 13th motion that were adopted by this House for the year 2018. And allow me to take you through the committee's observation. Mr. Speaker, having gathered the implementation status of motion passed by the County Assembly in 2018 by engaging the Office of the County Secretary and County Executive Committee members, the committee made the following observation. That the motions calling for the commitment of public funds for which no provision was made in annual estimate financial year 18-19 were adopted by the County Assembly. This is contrary to the provision of Standing Order number 47-3F, thus making it difficult to implement. 2, that the County Assembly did not allocate funds for motion passed by the House when considering the annual budget estimates. 3, that relevant department take long to submit implementation status of resolution made by the County Assembly. 4, that some motions are partially implemented by relevant County Executive Committee member due to budgetary constraint and the implementation period specified in the motions. Mr. Speaker, the next page is recommendation. Mr. Speaker, the committee made the following recommendation. 1, that within 60 days of the resolution of County Assembly or adoption of a report of a select committee, the relevant CCM under whose portfolio the implementation of the resolution falls should provide a report to the relevant committee of County Assembly in accordance with Article 153(4)(b) of the Constitution. 2, timely submission of implementation status of motion by the County Executive Committee members. Motion passed. 3, motion passed by the Assembly should have financial commitment and provision should be made in the annual estimate as per provision of Standing Order 47-3A and 47-3F. 4, Assembly Sector Committee to give consideration for budgetary allocation on budget estimate on resolution made by the Assembly. 5, thorough scrutiny by the Office of the Clerk on the admissibility of motion on whether it is in compliance with the provision of Standing Order number 47-3A to F. I think, Mr. Speaker, that brings us to the end of the report, and what is remaining is the annexures and the correspondence that this committee made to the respective department. Mr. Speaker, with that, I request Honorable Noor, who is a member of this committee, to second. Thank you.
Honorable members, I now propose that this County Assembly adopt the report of Committee on Implementation on the status of motions passed by the County Assembly in the year 2018. Honorable Mohammed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand to support the motion by Implementation Committee. But, Mr. Speaker, I have 2 concerns. One on my motion on illegal land fencing. Mr. Speaker, the county government has somehow addressed the problem in terms of urban areas, Mr. Speaker. But in rural areas where there is a lot of land, illegal land fencing, where animals will have been used for, Mr. Speaker, for pasture and grazing, have been illegally fenced. They have not taken any step, and I want to request the implementation committee through the chair that they should do further follow-up with the department, with the county government, and specifically the Department of Lands, Mr. Speaker, and to make sure that there is a lot of illegal land fencing that is stopped, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, just last week, I got a letter from one of the water users association in Ashabito Ward, Mr. Speaker, because by the time our assembly was passing that motion, it was in the media, and they were asking the implementation bit of it because there is a serious challenge in the rural areas, Mr. Speaker. That is one concern. The other concern, Mr. Speaker, today is the World Day for people living with disabilities. Mr. Speaker, this morning I did not even attend the plenary. I was with celebrating marking that day with the people living with disabilities, together with Honorable Halima and Honorable Abbas, and with the majority leader, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, those people are living in a very desperate situation, and a motion touching on their health was passed in this assembly, where the county government was required, Mr. Speaker, to put them into a medical cover through NHIF, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the county government did not implement that motion, Mr. Speaker. And their request to this honorable house is that as the oversight authority in this county, Mr. Speaker, we put pressure on the county executive so that they enroll those disparate people, Mr. Speaker, in NHIF, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, counties like Makueni, they have what we are calling universal health care, Mr. Speaker, where in Kijado, Mr. Speaker, they also have a universal health care, which is a very unique, Mr. Speaker, in Kijado, where a pastoralist will take one goat to the county government and they cover the whole family for that household, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, my also request to the chairman through the chairman, I request the committee, Mr. Speaker, to fast track the implementation of that motion that talks about the NHIF coverage, Mr. Speaker, because, Mr. Speaker, those are people we represent, and Mr. Speaker, they have no strength, Mr. Speaker, they are disabled, Mr. Speaker, and they don't have that strength to work for themselves, Mr. Speaker, and they live at the mercy of those able people like us, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, we need to fast track the implementation of that motion also. Mr. Speaker, I also commend that the committee has done a good job, and I support, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the committee's report. Mr. Speaker, why I support, I am happy with the recommendation of committee when it talks about thorough scrutiny by the Office of the Clerk on the admissibility of the motion on whether it is in compliance with the provision of Standing Order number 47. So, Speaker, that means some of the motion that has been approved is defective. So I think it also enlightens the Office of the Clerk to treat either statement or motion very carefully. The other thing they recommended is advice to the members, honorable members, those who are moving motions. When they talk about motion passed by the Assembly should have financial commitment, and provision should be made in the annual estimate as per provision of the Standing Order number 47.3A and 47.3F. So, Speaker, some of the motions that is moved in this House that entails budget, that entails financial matter, is moved when the budget is approved. I think this tells the members that you don't need to move any related motion that requires financial. That means commitment. That means there are times for moving the financial related motions. And why I'm really happy with the report moved by member for Elwak South. They have really touched on matters that we need to improve on in future. So Speaker, you know, I happens to be a member of this house in the first assembly, and the same committee was under the leadership of the member for Greater Dando. And this kind of observation has never been done. And Mr. Speaker, I want to commend the member for Elwak South and his committee. Which order number?
Mr. Speaker,
Which order number?
is the honorable member for Shimper in order by implicating that the honorable member for Dandu was incapable during the first assembly, Mr. Speaker. Is he insinuating the honorable member?
I think, Mr. Speaker, the honorable member for Greater Dandu is a senior member like me in this house. So when I want him to improve, I'm just informing the House that this has never happened. And this is one of the history made. Committee for Implementation bringing very good observations that has attracted my attention. And this cannot be ignored, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also want to advise Honorable Member representing Ramo to quote standing order numbers before he hijacked my contribution. So Speaker, it's good that we listen to each other and avoid interruption. So Speaker, when the committee recommended that within 60 days of resolution of the County Assembly or adoption of a report of select committee, the relevant CCM under whose portfolio the implementation of the resolution falls should provide report to the relevant committee of the County Assembly in accordance with Article 153. This itself has never happened. So Speaker, I don't know whoever understands this. This kind of recommendation has never happened. I happen to be one of the old members of this house and the most senior member. So Speaker, these are excellent recommendations that this house is trying to see quite a number of good things. So I want members, the chairs for other committees, to borrow the same example from Honorable Teno. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand to support, but I have some comments to make on the implementation report, Mr. Speaker. Committee on Implementation. Mr. Speaker, I can see the committee has done its best, but it tried to copy-paste all information from executive. They just misleaded the House, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to page 29, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, on this issue of world tournament, they are saying that sport has successfully conducted world tournament in all 30 wards in the county. This exercise benefited 282 registered football clubs. Mr. Speaker, sir, I represent a ward, and I have not seen such things, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I am sure more than 10 wards, I have confirmed that more than 10 wards never heard of world tournament, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, most motions that were passed in this house, Mr. Speaker, sir, the executive, they are only using English to play around with us, Mr. Speaker, sir, without giving us clear deadlines and commitment. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, sir, motions will be passed in this house, and to my opinion, it will end up not implemented, Mr. Speaker, sir. I think for the last few months, I've never seen someone bringing information to this house just because the 13 motions that were passed were never implemented fully. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like you to, through your direction, to talk to implementation committee to improve. I can see they have improved from 30% to 55%, Mr. Speaker, sir. I need them also to improve up to 70%. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also rise, just like my colleagues, to support the motion moved by the Honorable Member for Elwak, whom these days we read from the same page, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also concur with the Honorable Member for Shimpir on the following, Mr. Speaker, that most of the motions that we do sponsor and bring it to the following, to the House, lacks some basic merits, Mr. Speaker. Because for a motion to be tabled on the floor of the House, it must meet 6 conditions, Mr. Speaker. And some of these conditions, Mr. Speaker, pass without notice the table clerk and even the Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we want future motions to strictly meet the 6 conditions as per the Standing Order number 47. That no motion should find itself on the floor of the House without meeting the 6 laid down conditions as per Standing Order number 47. So that the executive will not have a leeway not to implement the said motion, Mr. Speaker. And I also concur with the chairman when he said, when they actually noted the same in their report. Mr. Speaker, having said that, I have a problem, just like the Honorable Member for Guticha, on the illegal fencing motion, Mr. Speaker. If we are not going to check this particular motion to be not to be implemented, Mr. Speaker, there is a lot of illegal fencing going on in the reserve, Mr. Speaker. Urban areas, as I agree, as he said, we are better off. But in the reserve, where our wards and locations are located, our animals have nowhere to graze because individuals, Mr. Speaker, have illegally fenced a huge chunk of land everywhere along the road and off the road, Mr. Speaker, so that it is owned by individuals or group of individuals, and that the nomadic way of life has totally been interfered with. And this is going to be fireworks in the next few years, Mr. Speaker, and we are going to see clash of communities, God forbid, Mr. Speaker, if we don't take care of this thing right now. I therefore request the Department of Land to make sure that this illegal fencing of land, now that they have enforcement groups with them, they make use of these enforcement officers so that to get away with illegal land, and they enhance entitlement and allocation letters for individual landowners. On the issue of NHIA for persons with a disability, I have a bone to pick with my chairman, who is supposed to be Mr. Honorable Abbas, on why he has not invited me to the World Disability Day, because he perceived that I am not disabled, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have confirmed to this Honorable House that I am among the people who are disabled, and that, and that Honorable Abbas should be directed by the chair to recognize me as persons with disability, Mr. Speaker, so that he can involve me in the all activities of the persons with disability in this county, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Abbas, what is your point of order?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what Honorable Kula is talking about is a bit misleading. Mr. Speaker,
But
He's one.
a member of.
I'm coming to that, Mr. Speaker. I'm coming to that. 5 days ago, I was with the Honorable Minority Leader and good teacher when I received a call from Nairobi. Somebody asking me to confirm if Honorable Kula is a member of your caucus at the assembly and the nature of his disability. Then what I made, I called him. I told him, what is your nature of disability? To date, he has not confirmed to me his nature of disability. So, Mr. Speaker, with him not disclosing to me as his chairman the nature of his disability, I came to register him from my caucus.
He called me, yes, he called me. But I could not be able to confirm to him because, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, due to the confidentiality issues, I could not be able to divulge my disability status to my chairman because I confessed that through a health report to the national organization, Mr. Speaker, and that I possess a disability card, Mr. Speaker, that I have shown my chairman, and he could not believe until I show him where I am disabled from, and that is a high top secret for my personal issues, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, he should not force me to show him my disability status because that is confidential, and that he should only believe in the card that I possess and nothing more.
Fine. Please, Honorable Abbas, please get back your seat. Please get back.
On the same, Mr. Speaker, the NHIF and the persons with disability, we passed this motion long time ago, Mr. Speaker, and we said people with disability have got a lot of problems and they should be enrolled into the NHIF, Mr. Speaker. And up to now, the chairman has not provided any data to show that this number of disabled people have been enrolled into the NHIF cover, Mr. Speaker. And that is the failure on the side of the chairman for implementation, whom we read from the same page, Mr. Speaker. On the issue of cemeteries, Mr. Speaker, the department said cemetery land has been identified in all sub-counties. I want to confirm that in my ward, there is nothing like that. I am a member for Ramu, and I have not received any such communication. And if there was, this is just an academic report. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I tend to support the motion. Thank you.
Coming to the motion, Mr. Speaker, I stand to support the report of the implementation, though I have some small reservations on parts of NHIF and the cancer motion. Mr. Speaker, the able chair of implementation has provided a detailed report, but in terms of NHIF, Mr. Speaker, this morning we attended World Disability Day. And Mr. Speaker, we came to realize that, Mr. Speaker, the people of disability fraternity in Mandera are suffering. Mr. Speaker, nowadays in our hospitals, especially in sub-counties, the county government has introduced what is called automated kind of payment, where if you want to buy a paracetamol, you must pay. It cannot be waived by even the medical soup. We have a big challenge in areas of Lefei, Mandera Town, Panissa, and Tagaba, Mr. Speaker. And Mandera bin, the poverty rate been high, Mr. Speaker. And then the disability society been affected largely, Mr. Speaker. For them to be even in the public hospitals, Mr. Speaker, is a big challenge. And this motion we passed some time back. I think, Mr. Speaker, with your due diligence, the implementation committee, they have partly captured it. But I wish, Mr. Speaker, through you redirect this part of NHF to health committee so that they follow up with the ministry concerned. Mr. Speaker, on the part of cancer, we know what is happening in our country. very disastrous, Mr. Speaker. They have solved partly, but the issue of MRI and those issues, it has not been well solved. I think equally that one can be taken by the Health Committee for follow-up. With that, I stand to support the report.
More to elaborate, but so Mheshimiwa Abbas said you give a direction to Health Committee. I think that one will not be applicable for now. The motion only lacks implementation, and let the committee of chair confirm that the motion has been implemented fully.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I wish to take this opportunity to thank all the honorable members who have contributed in one way or another to this motion, and as well as those who have opined differently, because it is their right. Mr. Speaker, having said that, it is my prayer and plea to this honorable House that, as we have witnessed this morning, once the report or a motion is taken to the floor of this House, it is ceased to be the owner of the motion. Just the same way, why I'm saying this, Mr. Speaker, is this: the member who sponsored this motion 1 year ago should not personalize this motion, because it is on behalf of that member and the remaining 47 members that the Committee on Implementation held several meetings, including invitation of the County Secretary, that produced this report today to this House. Mr. Speaker, another thing that I want to mention is that the Committee on Implementation is not an investigative committee, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what the committee did, we only relay the information pertaining to the status of the motion. Mr. Speaker, finally, I want to say this. I was once a student of political science. And in the definition of one professor, politics was once defined as statutory allocation of scarce resources. Mr. Speaker, what we are required to do here, we are only required to play our politics goods. Mr. Speaker, I mean by playing good politics means honoring of these motions that this honorable House passed, honoring through budgetary allocation. Mr. Speaker, Honorable Abdullahi Gulie is the member of this House, and not only a member, but also a budget committee member for that matter, Mr. Speaker. It is my prayer to him and the rest in the budget committee that whenever a motion is passed in this House, the subsequent years that comes after, being in the budget committee, they should ought to defend the motion they passed themselves by allocating resources.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Which order number? Mr. Speaker, I just defend because I am concluded.
Mr. Speaker, why should the honorable member name me while the chair and the vice chair of budget committee are around, Mr. Speaker? Does he have any ill intention?
Order, no.
Mr. Speaker, Honorable Abdullah Yunus is one of the 48 members.
Just continue, please.
And he is directly facing me. That is why I just took him as an example. It does not necessarily mean being in a budget, because budget is a standing committee. It might be changed next year, Mr. Speaker.
Okay.
Finally, I thank all the members for contributing to this point, and I say thank you.
Honorable members, I now put the question that this County Assembly adopt the report of Committee on Implementation on the status of motions passed by the County Assembly in the year 2018. As many as of that opinion say aye. As many as of contrary opinion say nay. The ayes have it. Members will go to the